Alright, welcome to Viking Test Prep. This is lecture number 3 in the English section, and today we'll be discussing phrases. Now, in previous lectures, I kind of stressed the importance of understanding what those core terms were that were in the parts of speech and in the parts of sentence. And all that is really important before you can move on to understanding phrases in their entirety. So if you're still struggling with parts of sentence and the parts of speech, I would suggest going back and reviewing those lectures before you watch this video. With that being said, let's move on to phrases. For the ACT Prep section, we are going to discuss two types of phrases. That's the prepositional phrase and then the verbal phrase. When we're dealing with prepositional phrases, we can have adjective phrases and adverb phrases, and I will talk more about this as we go through the lecture. And then for verbal phrases, we're talking about participle phrases, gerund phrases, and infinitive phrases. And for some of you, you may be pretty unfamiliar with the verbal and verbal phrases, and by the end of this lecture, you will completely understand them. So let's move on first to the prepositional phrase. First, let's identify what a phrase is. And a phrase is a group of related words that is used as a single part of speech. So if you remember parts of speech and how those connect, remember parts of speech are nouns, adjectives, and adverbs. They can be other things as well, but we're specifically discussing these. So again, a phrase is a group of related words that is used as a single part of speech, and that does not contain both a verb and its subject. We'll start off with the prepositional phrase, and this is something that I know you're all familiar with. A prepositional phrase includes a preposition of, for, from, to, those types of words, the object of the preposition, and any modifiers that go along with it. Now, what we're concerned with today is not just identifying the prepositional phrase and saying, aha, there it is. We're also concerned with asking ourselves, how is this prepositional phrase functioning in the sentence as a part of speech? And they can do that in two ways. They can function as an adjective or as an adverb. Pretty simple. Now, obviously, an adjective phrase is going to modify a noun or a pronoun. Take these examples. If we identify the prepositional phrases, the man with the long hair stole my coat. With the long hair is the prepositional phrase in this sentence, because again, prepositional phrases are the preposition and its object with its modifiers. So we're concerned with this whole phrase here. What is this phrase doing in this sentence? That's what you want to ask yourself. Well, it's modifying man. It's adding information to the man. It's acting like the word big, the big man, or the man with the long hair. It's just another way to modify a noun. And so what this would be an adjective phrase, again, because it's modifying the noun. Look at the next example. Many of these films have actors from Europe in them. Let's look at two of these prepositional phrases here. Many of these films have actors from Europe in them. So many of these actors from Europe, many of these films have actors from Europe in them. Modifying many and modifying actors. So these would both be adjective phrases. So both of these preposition sentences with the prepositional phrase in here are acting like adjectives. Adverb phrase, it's the same thing, but it modifies a verb, an adverb, or another adjective. Look at these sentences, for example. During the Vietnam War, many Americans lost loved ones. Let's identify the prepositional phrase during the Vietnam War, and you ask yourself, what is this modifying in this sentence? It's saying when. Many Americans lost loved ones. When? During the Vietnam War. So it's modifying the verb, and it is an adverb. Another little trick when dealing with adverbs, this isn't always true, but it works most of the time, is that you can take that phrase, that adverb phrase, and you can put it somewhere else in the sentence, and it still sounds good. If you look at this sentence, many Americans lost loved ones during the Vietnam War. Does that still sound okay? And you should be nodding your head because it does. And that's because it's modifying the verb, which is usually located in the middle of a sentence. And so no matter where you put this modifier, it's still going to modify that verb in the middle. So whether it's the beginning or the end, it still works well. And that's not always true, but the majority of the time it is. Look at the second example here. After college, Mary worked as a substitute teacher at the local high school. After college, Mary worked as a substitute teacher at the local high school. So after college, what is that modifying? Yes, she worked. When did she work? After college. That is a adverb phrase. What about this one? Mary worked as a substitute teacher at the local high school. Modifying teacher. What type of teacher? Oh, teacher at the local high school. So that's actually an adjective because a teacher is a noun. And again, if you go back to my tip there, can you move after college somewhere else? Mary worked as a substitute teacher at the local high school after college. Yeah, it sounds okay. I think that works best here, but still, that'll help you identify that it's an adverb phrase. All right, here are a few example sentences. Pause the video and go through each sentence and block off the prepositional phrases and also draw an arrow to the word that they modify and identify it. Is it an adverb phrase or an adjective phrase? All right, I went ahead and marked this up for you so you can check your work. I'll run through these briefly. So the professor from the University of Michigan arrived late from the bus station. From the University of Michigan, modifying professor, so it's an adjective. I could even do this and say this is an adjective as well, but this is a complete thing, so we won't do that. Arrived late from the bus station, so saying, where or when, it's an adverb. Fear often springs ignorance, from ignorance. Again, modifying springs, which is the verb, so it's an adverb. This sentence, we have a few of them. In 1980, Matthew was born into a family from Illinois. In 1980s, modifying was born. Matthew was born to a family from Illinois. Into a family is modifying was born, so it's an adverb. And this was an adverb as well. And from Illinois, modifying family. What type of family? A from Illinois family. Adjective. I hope the Chicago Bulls of the NBA will move their training center to Chicago. Of the NBA, modifying the Bulls, adding information, to the Bulls, and the Bulls is the noun, will move their training center to Chicago. Where, move where, to Chicago. Adverb. While I walked down the street, I noticed that the lights were off. Again, modifying walked. Where? Down the street. Adverb. How would you do? Good. Next, we'll talk about a verbal phrase. A verbal or a verbal phrase, is a verb that is acting like a different part of speech. So it is a verb, it looks like a verb, but it acts like either a noun, an adjective, or an adverb. So depending on what it is acting as, we call it a specific name. So if it's acting like an adjective, we call it a participle. If it's acting like a noun, we call it a gerund. The infinitive is a little bit more difficult because it's a verb acting like a noun, an adjective, or an adverb. But they're easy to locate because it's going to always be in the infinitive form of the verb, which, as we all know, has the word to in front of it. To go, to run, to swim. All right, let's start with the participial phrase. This acts like an adjective. Adjective, remember that. Okay, so it's a phrase that acts like an adjective. So let's try these three sentences out. Having already applied for classes, Janet was able to relax on registration day. Where's the phrase in the sentence? Having already applied for classes. Now, you have to ask yourself, although we know these are participle phrases, what is this phrase doing in this sentence? How is it working in this sentence? And here, it's adding information to Janet. Right? Janet, who has already applied for classes. So it's modifying Janet, which is a noun. And if it modifies a noun, it is an adjective. So it's a participial phrase. Let's look at the next sentence. So at the zoo, we saw many apes huddled together in an effort to protect an injured friend. Huddled together would be the participial phrase there. Why? Because it's modifying apes. What types of apes? Big apes, hairy apes, huddled together types of apes. And then finally, trained across the ocean, the sailor traversed the sea, stretching across the globe. It's trained to cross the ocean. Right? Who's trained to cross? The sailor. Traversed the sea, stretching across the globe. Got another one here. Stretching, modifying sea. So both those are acting as adjectives, and so they are considered participial phrases. Next, we'll talk about the gerund phrase. Again, it's a type of verbal phrase, but they call it the gerund because it is acting as a noun acts, and it's always going to end in ing, so that'll kind of give it away. But just like a noun can function as a complement in different ways, so can the gerund. So the gerund can be a direct object, an indirect object. It can be an object complement. It can be a predicate nominative, or it can also be the object of a preposition. So that's the tricky part of it. As far as ACT goes, you don't really need to identify what way it's functioning. As long as you can understand that it is a gerund, you'll be fine. And you'll never be asked to say, all right, here's a gerund. Now, why? Is it acting as a direct object? No, you'll never be asked that. So if you look at these three sentences, help you understand what a verbal phrase, that's a gerund phrase, looks like. Winning the state title is the team's goal this year. Okay, that's obviously our verb. Winning the state title, this whole thing, is a gerund phrase because it's functioning like a noun. It's the subject of the sentence. This is this. So that whole thing is functioning as a subject of the sentence, therefore it is a gerund phrase. If you look at the next sentence, Mark gave studying all his attention. Mark gave what? Well, studying all his attention. Obviously that's a direct object, but you don't need to know that. Just be able to identify that this is the gerund phrase. You know it's the gerund phrase. Why? Because this is your main verb. Just like is was your main verb. Winning wasn't your main verb. Studying isn't your main verb. These are your main verbs. Let's look at the next one. In cooking, use pepper at all costs. All right. Cooking. It's the object, the preposition there. So that's a gerund, not just a gerund phrase. It's actually just a gerund functioning as the object of the preposition. So therefore, this would be a gerund as well. So a little trickier, but still, it always helps to, as I said before in the other lectures, identify the main verb first, and then work backwards from there. Next, we'll look at the infinitive. The infinitive verbal phrase. It's a verb that acts like a noun, adverb, or an adjective. So in that sense, it can be a little tricky, but it's easy to spot because it's always in the infinitive form, which is to. Don't get confused sometimes. It can be tricky where to is actually functioning as just a preposition. So if it's a preposition to followed by a noun, that is not an infinitive phrase. That's just a prepositional phrase. If it's the word to followed by a verb, well, now you have an infinitive verbal phrase. So you always have to be aware of what follows to. Let's look at these sentences. To finish a semester early is my plan. Again, what's the main verb here? Is to finish a semester early. Well, that's your infinitive verbal phrase. That's all you need to really know. If you want to take it a bit further, you can ask yourself, well, what is it? Well, it's a noun because it's functioning as the subject of this sentence. To finish is this. Next, we want to go to the beach this summer. Here we have the tricky to go, the infinitive form with just the preposition. So we want, what do you want? To go to the beach this summer. So that whole thing is your infinitive phrase. And again, what's it functioning like? Well, it's a noun because it is the direct object. Next, because he tore his MCL, Rose was unable to play in the playoffs. To play in the playoffs, modifying unable, it was unable, so it is an adverb. So there you see an infinitive phrase functioning as an adverb. So those are the infinitives. A little tricky to see how they're functioning in terms of parts of speech, but very easy to identify. Here are a couple examples of verbal phrases. Pause the video, go through, identify the phrase itself, and then also identify is it a gerund, infinitive, or participial phrase. Alright, I went ahead and marked this up for you. How well did you do? Again, born with a medical condition for the first sentence, it's modifying Melissa, and Melissa is a noun, therefore it's functioning as an adjective, therefore it's a participial phrase. The same goes for the next sentence, it's modifying family, family is a noun, adjectives modify nouns. This is a verbal phrase, is a participial phrase. And then finally, reading his books, functioning as the subject of the sentence. And again, ing, so we kind of already know it's a gerund. And it's a gerund. Alright, in conclusion, today we discussed the prepositional phrase and how that prepositional phrase can act like an adjective or as an adverb, depending how the way it's used in the sentence. We also discussed verbals and verbal phrases, specifically participle phrases, a gerund phrase, and the infinitive phrase. At this point, open up the worksheet and complete it yourself. And then once you finish the worksheet, please click on the video for the worksheet and follow along with me as we go over the answers.